Welcome everyone to Ladder Daily Digest, and we're doing our new feature called Checking In, and today we're checking in with Steve Pynakker. He's wearing one hat now, but he's got a lot more going on. So Steve, what do you want to talk about?
Man, I guess you're checking in with me. So this was just a last minute thing where we were like, hey, why don't you come on and we'll do this check-in. So I'm like, oh yeah, okay, let's check in. Well, I think it's really fascinating to see the trajectory of the channel. Originally it was Mormon book reviews, and it was about reviewing the books in my collection, and then morphed into becoming one of the most cutting edge, most important interview programs that not only books of a variety of guests, of which I don't think any podcast is capable of actually booking the totality of all the different,
the width and the breadth.
Width and the breadth. That's a good one. Of what this channel has done. That's the remarkable thing. And really, honestly, every time I have a guest on, I think, ooh, this is going to do it. Like, they're going to hate me after this guest. Or if I go on this program, oh, they're going to hate me for none. No flack. Because I think really I've been able to establish a brand here and establish basically this idea that I am truly the Switzerland of Mormonism, as Dr. Randy Bell termed it, and really is a neutral Mormon podcast, and truly is. And
right. It's nice to have you on my show for a couple of good Alps instead of laps. I was just kidding.
So you're such a goof, Gene. I love you. So I really just appreciate the work that you're doing, by the way, as well. But I just wanted to just give you an example over the course of the last week, and maybe giving you an idea of what the next couple of weeks are going to look like. So just last week, you could argue that I played a role in breaking the two biggest news stories in Mormondom. One was the day before the announcement of the first female prophet of the Community of Christ. It was on my channel that I broke the news that they would be naming a new prophet the day before. Well, I also have you know that a year and a half ago, I had Evan Charley on my program, and we specifically talked about Stacey Cram as being one of the leading candidates, and that they would indeed name the very first female prophet. That was a year and a half ago. So I've been covering this news story longer than anybody else has, and been continuously covering it. So I did at least 2 or 3 episodes about the if you will, the succession crisis in the Community of Christ, because what happened was President Stephen Vesey, traditionally, he would have appointed his successor, but then he had a serious medical condition that basically impaired him to the point that he was not capable for a long time to be able to participate. Now, I've heard since that he's since bounced back a bit and he's able to take on some duties. But basically what we have is Stacey Cram is like the prophet president designate of the Community of Christ, and she will be formally installed at their next World Conference, which I believe is in the spring of 2025. And that's where
even that installation, will that still be like a year of prayer? And
I suspect that, yeah. I mean, yeah, I think that's that's really important to this church, is to, and even Evan Charley, he's like really like, excuse me, I apologize, is really like one of the leading progressive activists in the church. And she's really, really, really pushing the envelope. And whereas I don't maybe not agree with everything that they're doing or saying, I provided a platform for her voice to be heard. And she wants to, and so that's kind of interesting. And what she was advocating was that the next prophet should be democratically elected by the people. That they even the Community of Christ refers to themselves as a prophetic people. Well, if they're a prophetic people, why not use the actual democracy to actually appoint to elect a prophet, which I think is an interesting thing
like Joseph Smith installed with common consent.
Yeah, exactly. So then I think the other news story that I helped break was, well, the story, I didn't break the story, but I actually dug into the story to make it a news story, because it was actually under the radar story that nobody, I saw it on the Mormon Reddit, and it's like the LDS church is leasing space in a very important historic Protestant church building in Manhattan. This is the oldest church in America. Okay, they historically go back before America and everything. I mean, they were chartered in the 1600s. So you have the oldest Protestant church, very historic church. Okay, you can't write the history of Christianity in America and not include that church. Okay, that's how important of a church this is. And now they've opened up a space for this, a safe space, a space sharing a sacred space, interestingly enough, he's a queer pastor, and it's an LGBTQ affirming church that has pride flags hanging outside the building. And he said, Steve, we're not taking down those pride flags. And I thought, wow, this is a really fascinating story. So the same week that the church announces that their spokesperson, their new spokesperson, who then when they dig, we all dig, and it didn't take long to find it. So the church knew this. He was participating in pride parades. He's an affirming person, and he's the spokesperson, the mouthpiece for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. That same week, they signed this lease with an LGBTQ affirming church. I don't necessarily think that's a coincidence. I think that the church might be testing the waters to see how they're going to proceed in this arena, vis-a-vis how do we as a 21st century church handle LGBTQ people in our midst.
You mean, how do we as a 19th century church move into the 21st century?
Okay, that's one way to look at it too. Yeah, and of course, I had that very contentious conversation with Jacob Hansen and Jim Bennett last year. And obviously, I think it was the most explosive Mormon podcast of the year last year. I can't think of any more explosive episode when they have two faithful Latter-day Saint apologists get together and just show how there is division in the church. It was a fascinating conversation. And basically, up in the 50s, 60s, and 70s, there was no way that the black priesthood hand would be lifted. Just wasn't going to happen. And then it happened. Mm-hmm. And so the same people that are saying there's no way that the church would affirm same-sex marriages and all this kind of stuff. Just looking at the trajectory of history, I kind of think that could happen. And what you need to understand was that this pastor, of this church in Manhattan saw the same trajectory. And that's what encouraged him to sign this agreement with the church. You need to understand that other churches, and some that were evangelical or were not LGBTQ affirming, had put in for that space. And they didn't feel that there would be in a safe space to share with those groups. But he found that, I think he sees the trajectory of the church as an outsider. And to him, I think he's hopeful that this relationship, these rubbing of shoulders, walking the same hallways with each other. Like he said, I'm going to be fist pumping those LDS kids with my manicured nails and with my rainbow vestments. He says, and he even said in the interview, and I think this is really key. He says, I went to the board and said, there's 150 kids that are coming into this building from the different LDS wards. And we may never know it, but we might save one person's life. By doing what we're doing. And we may never hear that story. He said, that's why I want to do it.
That's so right. I thought my vote is for the affirmative.
Yeah. So
I don't know. Those are big stories, but I think you're overlooking the biggest story, and that's that you interviewed Summer Rain.
Oh yeah,
the show yesterday. I have a particular interest in that story.
Yeah. Well, first of all, I did give you props because this is the thing. I was the one that discovered Rebecca Biblioteca. And one day we're going to sit down and have an interview because it was really fascinating. The impact that her coming on my program 2.5 years ago changed the trajectory of her life. Okay.
Right.
And honestly, when the first time I interviewed Rebecca, I was like, man, I really liked our chemistry, but I didn't think of her as being a co-host. And then it evolved into what happened was we were doing Under the Banner of Heaven after show. And I had her do the first 2 episodes as a guest. And then we were going to have Jim Bennett on. And about 45 minutes before I was going to film with Jim, I was like, Rebecca, I think you should be my co-host. And that's when it would forge something beautiful. So I like to take credit for finding Rebecca. I want to give you props for identifying Summer as another wonderful human and a great voice in this space. And I gave you credit. Now, all these other people that took her as a co-host, you got to remember, I don't know if all of you, I think some of you did. I think John DeLynn gave me some credit, but I don't know if everybody who has Rebecca Biblioteca as a co-host needs to at least acknowledge that I was the one that first caught the vision for her and saw that she was talented. And I want to give you props for doing the same with Summer. I think it's really cool. And so we're going to start. She's going to be an occasional co-host, partly because, of course, Rebecca doing Mormonish, she's a very busy person. And I thought, well, and then of course I have multiple co-hosts on. She's not the only one. She's just the most frequent. But I thought, when I first was doing my channel, about 90 to 95% of my audience was male. Okay. Now, since adding Rebecca and adding different topics into it, my audience is consistently 35 to 40% female. So I feel like if I can't get Rebecca on as frequently, I need to have another female voice. And that's why I thought Summer would make an excellent co-host.
That's right. And so what's on the horizon right now?
So one of the projects that I'm working, first of all, I literally have 5 or 6 things going on all the time, whether I'm working on a breaking news story, doing some investigating. I talk to newspaper reporters off the record. I talk to people in high places throughout all the different churches confidentially about different things. So literally my channel's become a clearinghouse of information. So you just never know when the next breaking story could come across MBR. But also one of the
Stay tuned is the words, right?
Stay tuned. So one of the projects I'm going to start up on is I'm actually in the process of assembling some of the top Book of Mormon scholars in the world. And I'm going to have a co-host named Dr. Nehemiah Gordon, who's one of the top Hebrew scholars in the world. But I mean, this man has studied the Dead Sea Scrolls, went to the Vatican, and was able to have access to some of the rarest documents in Christendom. He is a brilliant, one of the smartest people I've ever met. And he's fascinated by the Book of Mormon. And so what we're going to do is we're going to read through the Book of Mormon. Now, he got sick, so we weren't able to start it at the beginning of the year, but this really isn't going to be a come follow me read through, because what we're going to do is we're going to start with Mosiah because of Mosiah priority. So we're going to actually read the Book of Mormon as it was first revealed, which was, people don't understand, the last 116 pages wasn't, when they got the small plates in Nephi, they translated, what they did was the actual book of all 116 pages probably included the first 2 chapters of Mosiah. And so that they got lost. So rather than start from the beginning, they just kept on translating from what would have been second or third Mosiah on to the very end of the Book of Mormon, and then went back and translated the beginning, what is now the beginning of the Book of Mormon. So
the plates of Lehi.
Exactly. So yeah, right. So I was talking to Brent Metcalf on the phone the other day, and I'm hoping, fingers crossed, because there's some issues going on right now that might make it a little difficult. But what I want to do is actually do a prelude episode, is what is the Mosiah priority? Because it was actually Brent Metcalf that first identified that. Awesome Scott in 1993. So it went from everybody, including Royal Skousen, believing first Nephi priority, to now it's universally accepted in the scholarly community that it's actually Mosiah priority. And so what we're going to do every episode, we're going to have a leading Book of Mormon scholar or two, and maybe a well-read lay person. I'm not sure about the lay. I might just make this purely a scholarly thing. And we're going to read through the Book of Mormon.
That's right. Probably because of your episodes on that this year. In a few iterations down the road, the Come Follow Me might do the same thing and start with the...
honestly, I think this will be like fascinating, because it will be the first time I'll have read through the Book of Mormon cover to cover. And so it will be me in real time analyzing the text and also looking at it from a Protestant lens. Then we're going to have a gentleman reading it from a Hebrew lens. And what's so fascinating is that within the Mormon scholarly community, those who are faithful do believe that the Book of Mormon contains an ancient Hebrew-centric text, right? Even though it's Reformed Egyptian, Hebrew is at its core. So a lot of people within the Mormon scholarly community are trying to tease out Hebraic, underlying Hebraic,
Hebraisms.
Hebraisms and all that kind of stuff. So it'll be interesting to have a Hebrew scholar engaging the text to see if he's able to detect that as well.
If he vouches for that.
Yeah.
Theory.
So that's what I've been working on. We're working, and not only do we do like entertainment, and we do breaking news, and we do Mormon culture, and we talk to other Mormon podcasters, and we talk to faithful people, we talk to conservative people, we talk to liberals, we talk to progressives, we talk to evangelicals, we talk to atheists, we talk to everybody. But really the key thing about this channel is that I always want to get back to doing good scholarship. And when I say, what do you mean? Well, I've been cited in my channel has been acknowledged in one of the leading anthropological journals in a paper written by Thomas Murphy and Simon Southerton. This channel has been quoted in books, and this channel really in many ways has affected Mormon scholarship and Mormon history, because we broke the news story 2.5 years ago about the pollen study of what they were growing at the farm in Vermont. Joseph Smith Jr. was growing. Mark Staker came on and revealed the news. And then just all the news stories that we've broke, that we found that actually it's a myth that Nauvoo was a swamp. It was never a swamp. It was continuously inhabited for over 10,000 years. People don't live in swamps. And the malaria was brought in by people, not by mosquitoes, because malaria is not common in that part of the country. So the narrative, even the opening narrative of Nauvoo's history, has to be these stories are told for the first time publicly on my channel. And there's a bevy of other stories and other things that we have identified, broken news throughout the years, and it's actually had an effect on Mormon scholarship. And by the way, I've been invited to give a presentation at this year's Mormon History Association. And I did a presentation at John Whitmer Historical Association this past September. And so I'm very excited about doing this. And so I know I'm taking a lot longer than you anticipated, my friend. But
where is the Mormon History Association this year?
Oh, great. Yeah. So it's going to be taking place in Kirtland, although we'll be primarily using facilities in Cleveland. We, of course, will be spending, because Kirtland is a suburb of Cleveland. So we'll actually be using a facility in Cleveland, but we'll be spending a lot of time in Kirtland as well. So last year
I can provide a link to the Mormon History Association and other things that we've talked about as well.
And last year, the Mormon History Association was in Rochester, New York, just outside of Palmyra. So it was the first time I was able to climb Hill Cumorah and go to Joseph Smith's boyhood home and go to the Sacred Grove.
And you brought your metal detector.
The thought is that that there's a repository of records buried somewhere, and that actually that's still there, and it's implied that there were wagon loads, and the thought is that it was these items were taken out of a separate hill and buried in another. And of course, one of the stories that I've been working on is about saving the Mormon Cave, because the potential location for the Hall of Records could be demolished, and so. I don't think it's going to happen, but I haven't heard anything from Don Bradley, but hopefully I'll get an update from him on that as well.
There you go. Well, thanks a lot, Steve, for checking in with me today. And I'll put this out later today. Make sure that, say that again.
I said, awesome, Gene. Anytime Gene Judson sends me a link, I'm going to hop on.
That's right. And everybody have a great day. Like and subscribe. And check out the links that we provide in the description. And Steve actually discovered me as well. So, and this coming year after Sunstone, we're going to do our 3rd annual review. And so we're slated for a lifetime of reviews for the next foreseeable future. Yes. All right, Steve, thanks a lot.
We're bound to each other. Later.
Bye-bye.